My folks got married in 1930. A year later, he graduated in 1931 from the university, and from then on, they decided they better figure out what they wanted to do next. My mother had to have a hysterectomy, and therefore I was an only child. And we always consider ourselves a threesome. My dad kept to himself a lot. He was actually an orphan, being with his grandmother, and he never was able to tell his deep feelings. And so he lived in a man's world and did things that men did when he could afford the time, whereas my mother liked the philosophy. And she would sit and talk to me about things that would make her feel good, because I was the kind of kid that would like to talk. And so we got along very well, except when I went too far and didn't follow the rules. Well, I didn't do too much work as a young child. More than anything else, I tried to save money by not requiring things as a child. And so you learn to make our own toys. For instance, if I wanted a scooter, I had to get somebody else's used skates and tear them apart and then get an apple box and all the things needed to get a street scooter. Same thing went if you wanted to make a boat. You went to the lumber yard and looked for scrap and made your own boat. You didn't buy one. You didn't buy anything, you made it yourself. My folks also, at the end of the month, invariably I knew they were running low on money. The rental house they had cost $25 a month. My dad made $125 a month from Sears. And that meant we didn't have much money to fool around with. So at the end of some months, I'd hear my mother say, "Stein," which was his name, "we're gonna run out of money this month. I've only got $10 for the rest of the week. We're gonna have soup." And what we would have then is vegetable soup with saltines. And the vegetable man would give my mother a bag full of cheaper vegetables, and the butcher, which they went to in those days, would give her soup bones free. And one time I went back there and I said to the butcher, because I knew they liked my mother, I says, my dad beat up my mother because you didn't have much meat on the last set of bones. And he said, "Oh, is that right?" And so my mother came to the butcher about a week later and she says, "Mrs. Rogers, if your husband gives you any more trouble, I'll take care of him." And so it turns out that the word came out, and I told my mother, and she says, at first she admonished me, and then she thought about it and she laughed, because the butchers were very, very helpful from then on. Just about every thing in my life, people in events have a musical connotation with them. And I don't know why, and I don't have a musical bone in my body, but I'm very aware of what is going on around me musically. By the way, both of them were very aware people. They knew what was going on all the time. And as a kid, I knew that too. I knew they would spot anything I was doing that was not right. However, they gave me the right to make my own mistakes and solve them, as long as I wasn't doing something that would hurt somebody else or myself, if they could prevent it. But they let me get hurt. If I wanted to take a risk, they let me take the risk. Like football. My mother, when I went out for football, she says, "I've spent enough on those damn teeth of yours. Now don't get them knocked out." But she'd send me off to play the game, and I knew she found it difficult. But she raised me to be a man. And my dad just assumed that that's what was expected of me. But she's the one that enforced it. She didn't want any mollycoddling kid around. But when I left at 17, she fell apart. And she had an alcohol problem after that for a while. And it was very sad. And nothing I could do about it. But her one and only had left. And she didn't want him to be a wimp. So she took the brunt of it because she couldn't talk to my dad philosophically. He just wasn't that kind of person. He was very dependable, but not the kind of guy that wanted to get into his deep thoughts. And she was the kind that needed it. So she had a tough time when I left home. And I was raised to be a man, and so that's what I was. So I left home without any questions about it, even though I wanted to be around them. I loved to be around them. So, but I wanted also to make my own life. The coach caught me after one of my best games in football, and he says, "Raj," he says, "there's a gentleman out there who wants to talk to you about the Navy, and maybe you can talk to him." I said, "Okay." I like boats, I like the sea. I was very naive about what he was talking about, because I knew he was in the Navy during World War II. So I went out there, and there was a gentleman standing there, very erect. He had a pinstripe suit, and he had shoes that I could see my face in them. And this guy really impressed me. He says, "Have you ever thought about the Naval Academy?" And I said, No. He says, "Well, why don't you check into it? I understand you have good grades. Your coach thinks you're a good specimen for football. And if you want to come by my office, I'll show you the curriculum." Well, curriculum was the magic word, because I had in my mind, I wanted an education that was full and covered all the bases, and then I could go into my specialty. That's what I thought an education was. I was already being looked at by Stanford and UCLA coaches, and therefore it turns out I had to decide which one had the best school for an education. And believe it or not, when I got to Mr. Pierce's office out of the class of 32, he gave me a little folder which was the curriculum, and I said, "That's for me." It turns out the first year as a plebe, you're assigned a room, any size they want to give you. In our case, it was a 3-man room, and I had a roommate, that was Phil Callis, but we needed another one, we didn't know who to ask. So they give you somebody. The guy I got was from St. Louis. His name was Bob Birkenmeyer, a German name, and he was very proud of that, even because he admired Hitler and he felt power is right. He would corner my other roommate when I was gone and tell him that the guys were talking about him because he didn't get around enough and wasn't social enough. Then he'd get me in the corner another time and say the same thing to me and do other things that to me showed he was just a bad character. It turns out that our 4th year, they had a game called field ball, and it was like football with no rules. Out comes Berkemeyer on the field one day, and he gets on the opposite team. One time he's running down the sideline, and I said, God, this is perfect. Swing around and hit him as hard as I can with my elbow in his face. And he gets up and he says, you want to fight, don't you? I can hardly wait, I said. And then he left the field and everyone saw that. It turns out it's anticipatory the week before because it's called June Week, and the graduating class is getting ready for their graduation, and we're getting ready to go to the sea in ships, as the expression goes. But it turns out I didn't know what to expect because I wasn't sure of myself. I'm just a common guy from California, and you have to do a yes sir and salute the flag and get permission to come aboard, and the officer of the day is standing there and taking you into account. And so when I got on the gangplank, I saw 3 Swabbies leaning on the lifelines and looking at the girls rather than me. I thought they were going to size me up. And I got all my story straight, what I'll say to the officer, and I got aboard. And a first-classman then, who was in charge of us youngsters, sent me to my bunk. But I'm really thrilled to think, here I am, 17 years old, and I'm going to Europe. And how many guys get to do this? And I wonder what I'm going to see, even though our ship is headed for Copenhagen, some are headed for Edinburgh. And I wasn't thrilled with that because I really wanted to go to England. I love Shakespeare, and I thought, oh, darn, I want to go so bad to see where English history took place. So we leave port, and it's very exciting. You get out there, and the wind blows the breeze. It's very humid on our coast, but then it gets very pleasant. And then lo and behold, I get up one morning, and the skies are very gray, and the ship's waving around a little bit. And I stand there. You stand on the deck, and you go down to get to the food. And the first thing I think is I think this ship's going to be getting into a storm. Even I felt that. And lo and behold, we were. We're getting into an infamous North Atlantic storm, and no midshipman usually gets into anything like that. I could hear the waves hitting the side right next to me. And therefore, we found out we survived, but the waves were higher than the bridge of the ship. And so it turns out that sound I heard was something that happened to the ship very markedly, and they had put the locking jacks on one of the propeller shafts and stopped one of them. So one of the propellers weren't functioning. And it turns out that we were then asked, do you want to, the captain was asking, should I go back to Norfolk, or do we go ahead to Europe? I was praying in my mind, please, please send us on. And the message came to proceed alone to Plymouth, England, where Sir Francis Drake, the Plymouth colony, the DDA fleet left. I thought, God, thank you. And on we went with 2 ships taking us to Plymouth Harbor, and they left, leaving us by ourselves. We ended up in dry dock to one of the most beautiful times you could ask for England, and a trip that our embassy and the British Navy thought we were such unfortunate people to be sent to dry dock when we could be out at sea. And I thought, what are you talking about? You just salute the ensign, walk across a gangplank, and you're on land. You know, Liberty boat, no nothing. Just have a good time, or what you can do, and we did.
My dad was born in Japan, Hiroshima, Japan, 1885. Came to the States in 1904. He became a very good chef and worked at the Dale's Hotel as a chef for several years, and he must have lived very frugally because Japanese weren't accepted at that time. My dad wanted us to have a true American-style life. He wanted my mother to be happy. When he brought her over, he got a tutor for her so she could learn English. She wanted a piano. He bought her a piano. She took piano lessons, but then she became pregnant, so the piano lessons didn't last all that long. The first place I remember was living in Portland, because my dad was then working for the Benson Hotel as a chef, and that was the premier hotel in Oregon, Portland, and that was where the presidents used to go. And there was a small Japanese community, and we went to something like a nursery school, and my mother taught me to read. This is mother. This is mother. See Jane run. And June came home from school, and I said, I can read, show me. So I did. And she said, oh, that's all wrong.
From the NBC newsroom in New York, President Roosevelt said in a statement today that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, from the air. I'll repeat that. President Roosevelt says that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii from the air.
I was playing with my younger sister, who was 5 at the time, and we always watched I Love a Mystery. And so when that time came along, we turned on the radio, and all we heard was about this bombing. And my mother was there. She heard it. She started to yell because she was upset. She said, it can't be true. It can't be true. A tiny little country like Japan attacking a big country like the States. And besides, Daddy would have called us, and he hasn't called. It's not true. It's not true. Helen, our piano teacher, also told me that the neighbors said we were spies because we had a lot of people at our house on December 7th. And I knew it wasn't true because we never had a lot of cars in front of our house. So I told my dad. He knew that was all wrong, and he came later and told me that was when Mr. Miyake had died, and he had died in November, along that area. And the people came to our house after the funeral for refreshments, and that's when all the cars were parked in front of our house, not December 7th. We had to leave in the morning because we had to be at the train station by 7 in the morning. We were walking out, and I noticed my dad turned around to look at his house. We're never told where we were going, and it was late at night when we stopped, and we found out later it was near Fresno. It was called Pinedale Assembly Center. I remember we walked in and we saw cots, regular cots, and mattresses were on the bed. There was nothing to do, and I don't know where the kids got it, but they were out playing softball, and they had teams throwing the ball around. Mother started to knit socks for the GIs, and I had to pick up the yarn because she didn't want to go where the soldiers were, and they were sitting outside this big building. I can't remember what it was, and they were sitting out there, and I walked by once, and one of them said, "Are you Japanese?" And I went, "No, I'm American," but I didn't want to say it too loud. I was scared.
Well, I always wondered what it'd be like to have a brother, and I assumed you'd have similar ideals, and that's exactly what we had. And I thought, well, gee whiz, it's kind of fortunate that at this stage of my life, I've got a guy that was trying to get in the academy the same way. We were both going to talk to our congressman the same way. We were both reacting to the BS we heard from congressmen the same way. And so it was just one of those things. I could see other guys around, maybe they go together and have a drink or something. But with us, it was more of a deeper, intellectual type of commonality. And that's what was, to me, I felt very fortunate to find a guy I could talk to like that and I could live with. I would talk to his wife, and he was slowly disintegrating mentally and physically from Parkinson's. And when he left, there was a hole in my life in the sense of I didn't have this person that I'd grown up with. Now, we had our own families, so your attention gets distracted, but it was like something that left my life, and being kind of I guess I like to think of myself as a man. You have to accept these things, and I did. But I am reminded every once in a while, either through music or an incident, of the relationship we had. Was on my own, and I had accepted a job as the marketing director for the brand new World Trade Center being built in downtown Los Angeles. And so I decided to move from Inglewood, where I had been all along, to the downtown apartments that were first being built across the street from the World Trade Center. And they were called the Bunker Hill Towers. And they're first tall apartment buildings built in Los Angeles. So I was coming down from my 14th floor apartment for the first time. And on the 5th floor, two girls got in, and one of them was a Japanese girl, and I don't know why I honed in on her, and I said, where are the storage bins for this place?
Well, I know I was on the elevator, and he got on, and I don't remember him asking me where the storage bins. I think I told him, but that was it.
So the next day, coincidentally, I was outside in the front of the building. Here we're in downtown LA, and she was in I remember, a yellow sundress. And she was by herself, and I says, "Hi." And I introduced myself again. I says, "Would you like to go to Fedco with me?" And Fedco happens to be a sort of a big box thing that was for veterans. You had to be a member. And so she said, "Oh, yes." And I thought, gee, that's a girl for me who will do, come right along like that. Well, it turns out she was in administration for Sears Roebuck. And she had been told by the management that the Fedco had trained their people very well, and you ought to check that out. So she was going to check those people out, not to be with me.
He did ask me if I wanted to go to Fedco, and my cousin was a member of Fedco because she worked for San Diego County or city, but she never offered to take me, and since he suggested, I thought it was a good deal.
She finally invited me to a dinner at her place on a Thursday night.
And I figured the people I would have for dinner would mostly be Japanese, so I got the luncheon size. Well, he came and he piled the plate, and I thought, whoa, why doesn't he take just a little bit and just add to it? And the second time he came, he piled the plate, and I thought, this is crazy. So I put out a serving plate. He said, this is more like it.
That night, after dinner, which I enjoyed very much, the first thing on TV was Julia Childs with Dinner with Julia. And it starts out with the grand piano playing These Foolish Things Remind Me of You. And to this day, that reminds me of Lillian.
I guess I didn't notice his looks until someone said, oh, he's good looking. So I thought, I'd look and I thought, oh, yes, he is good looking.
Lillian, in the meantime, had bought a condo in Pasadena, and so I would visit her there and I'd help fix the place up. And then finally, when we did get married, which wasn't much later, I ended up living there, and we spent the next 30 years at the condo.
He was pleasant, except he was kind of fussy about his food.
A lot of fun to be with, because she had a very positive attitude. She smiled at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And it was nice to be around her. And we had similar values, and we thought about life very much the same. And both of us could work together and laugh together and be honest together. That's what it all was about.
These foolish things remind me of you. Trouble melts like lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where